Once there was a young man who had a passionate love for God. He felt called to serve God, and so, as a cradle Catholic, he entered the seminary. From the time he was a child, he had been told that the Roman Catholic Church was the true church founded by Jesus Christ himself. However, the more he studied, the more he began to wonder if the Catholic Church was really the right one. He understood the theological truth passed on through the church. He comprehended the apologetic arguments that support the Catholic Church, and he knew the historical facts that demonstrated that the Catholic Church was the church established by Christ and entrusted to Peter and the apostles. But all that knowledge seemed to dissipate once he went to Mass in the parishes in his diocese. It didn't matter if he went to St. John's or St. Andrew's or Our Lady of Grace or Our Lady of Consolation. He experienced the same lifeless service. The Gospels teach that Jesus is all about love and compassion, but when he went to Mass, the people there didn't even greet each other. Many times, people sitting at the end of the pews wouldn't even get up so others could get in safely. Instead, they sat stone cold and let other people stumble over their kneelers to get to the middle seats. The music was painful, and the people didn't sing anyway, or respond for that matter. They just sort of stood there like zombies in the room, not involved. The sermon was not engaging. Typically, the priest read something that seemed to bore him, which in turn was boring to everyone else. When it came time for communion, people walked absent-mindedly towards the front of the church. The young seminarian observed that there seemed to be a greater sense of anticipation and joy standing in line at the corner bank than there was standing in line to receive the Lord of Lords. Before the Mass was over, many of the people just walked out. No one greeted each other and barely acknowledged the people they just had worshiped with. However, when they got to the parking lot, oh my gosh, it was cutthroat. This seminarian's problem was not what he knew about the Catholic Church, but how he experienced it. The young man was perplexed. He rejoiced in the teachings of the church, but was left cold by what he observed as the practice of everyday Catholics. He debated, should he dedicate his life to this church, or should he seek something more alive? He was really struggling with this question, and one day he sat in the cafeteria of the seminary, lost in his thoughts. An old lady who worked in the cleaning up the tables in the cafeteria between meals watched him and was convinced that he needed a kind word. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, son. What's the matter?" Her inquiry surprised him, but she had a kind voice, so he shared with her his dilemma. "I love the church. I love its history. I love its teaching. I love its rich tradition. But once the idea of the church, the experience is something entirely different. Our services feel dead. The people who go to Mass seem unmoved and uninspired. I've been to Protestant services, and the people are very friendly. They're engaged in the worship, and you leave feeling uplifted. I just don't know how to tell which church I should dedicate my life to." The old woman sat next to the seminarian and told him this story. Once there was a great king who had 3 sons. The king had a precious gift, a magic ring that gave him great compassion, generosity, and love. As he was dying, each of his sons went to him and asked the father for the ring after his death. To each one of his sons, he promised to give the same ring. Now, how could he possibly do that? For there were 3 sons, 1 ring, 3 sons. Here's what he did. Before he died, he called in the finest jeweler maker of the land and asked him to make 2 identical copies of the ring. After his death, each of his sons was presented with a ring. Well, it wasn't long before each of the sons figured out that his brothers also had a ring, and therefore 2 of them had to be fakes. Only one of them could be the genuine article. And so they went before the judge and asked the judge to help them determine which was the authentic ring. The judge, who called in many experts, but they could not distinguish among the three rings. So the judge declared that we shall watch and see which son behaves in the most generous, gracious, and loving manner. Then we'll know which son possesses the original ring. And from that day on, each son lived as if he was the one with the magic ring, and no one could tell which was the most gracious, generous king. Then the old cleaning lady, having told this story, said to the troubled seminarian, "Does it really matter? For you know which church is the most authentic? Isn't it more important that you live your life as the most authentic Christian as you can?" I think that old lady was not only wise, but correct. I like the old saying, the proof is in the pudding. I also share the concerns of the seminarian, especially when I see so many people not participating, not being moved, not being changed. I wonder if that seminarian came to St. John the Evangelist for Mass, would he feel Christ's love was present among all of us? Would he see a committed assembly enthusiastically giving praise to God? If not, why not? In the 10th chapter of Luke's Gospel, a scribe asked Jesus, "Of all the commandments, which is the most important?" The answer, of course, is rooted in Deuteronomy, is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And then Jesus adds, and the second most important commandment is, love your neighbor as yourself. I believe we would all agree that Christianity is about the gift of God's love and of God's expectation of us to be loving. The key word in Christianity is love. Christianity is founded on the interconnectedness of God's love and our response to the gift of God's love, and how we then share what we have experienced with others. This is a wonderful line, there's a wonderful line in the musical Les Miserables that goes something like this: to love another person is to see the face of God. We had a slogan posted on our welcome monitor that read, "If Jesus is in your heart, please tell your face." Love is not love until you give it away.